listeners of the Bio Report, I want to tell you about a new member benefit from the California Technology Council. CTC has teamed with Reprivata to offer members 6 months of Reprivata's COT network service for free, which gives companies the power of a VPN at a fraction of the cost. A remote, flexible workforce is the new normal, but most corporate networks aren't built to accommodate work from home at scale. Reprivata's COT network offers an easily deployable, affordable, and scalable solution to securely enable remote workers and protect the corporate network. To learn more about this and other member benefits, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. The administration of biologics can be challenging because of the sheer volume of product needed to deliver a dose to a patient. It's for this reason that many of these therapies must be infused into a patient, a process that is disruptive, costly, and can take several hours. Halozyme's Enhanze drug delivery technology has been used by a number of biologics producers to take a therapy that would otherwise need to be infused to allow it to be administered with a subcutaneous injection. We spoke to Renee Tannenbaum, Vice President of Global Partnering for Halozyme, about the company's Enhanze drug delivery technology, how it works, and the company's reorganization to focus on partnerships around it. Renee, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Danny. A pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about Halozyme, its Enhanced drug delivery technology, and how the company has rebuilt its business strategy around this. Let's start with Enhanze, though. What is Enhanze?
That's a great question. Enhanze is based on the proprietary enzyme recombinant human hyaluronidase PH20. There is a human enzyme, a human hyaluronidase enzyme, and Halozyme has developed a recombinant version of that. I'd be happy to go into a little bit more about how it works, if you'd like.
Yeah, what's the normal function of the enzyme in the body?
Okay. So a little bit of biology then. So if you think about the skin, there are 3 layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and then the subcutaneous space. The subcutaneous space is primarily composed of fat, some structural components like elastin and collagen, and then a sugar called hyaluronin. Hyaluronin forms a gel-like substance in the subcutaneous space, and this is what's important when it comes to Enhanze. That gel-like substance creates a resistance to injecting volume into the subcu space. The typical volumes you can inject are usually 1 to 2 ml subcutaneously. And so what the enzyme does is it breaks down the hyaluronin as you're injecting the drug and the enzyme co-formulated together. It breaks down the hyaluronin so you can actually deliver large volumes of injections subcutaneously. And that's how the drug basically works.
So when we think of biologics that are infused into a patient, is volume the issue of why those drugs get infused as opposed to injected?
Exactly. Most of the biologics are large volumes. They can be 30, 60, 90 mLs. It depends on the concentration. If a company wants to go to a smaller injection volume that could be administered subcutaneously, they would co-formulate it with our enzyme. And that co-formulated product is injected subcutaneously. Our typical products are in the range of 5 to 20 mLs, which is a lot of volume and a lot more than the standard 1 to 2 that you can deliver without the enzyme.
And what is it actually doing once it's formulated with a biologic?
So it doesn't do anything to the biologic, but when you inject the co-formulated product into the subcutaneous space, the enzyme breaks down the hyaluronan I mentioned that's in the skin. It's a sugar that's naturally in the skin. It breaks it down and opens the space. Think about it like opening the subcu space so that larger volume can be dispersed, and so the drug can then be absorbed into the systemic circulation. So it facilitates that subcu injection of large volume fluids.
What does it take to actually formulate a biologic with Enhanze? Does it actually does it require doing something to bind it to it, or is it just a matter of mixing it into the liquid?
It's more the mixing. So typically what we do when we work with a partner and their therapeutic is we first want to make sure that the enzyme is compatible with their drug, that there's no effect of the drug on the enzyme or vice versa. So we test for compatibility. Then we would test for stability, making sure that the two, when combined, the enzyme and the drug, are stable over a long period of time so that the drug can be manufactured and sit on the shelf for a period of time. Once that's done, then it's simply mixing the two together, and the amount of enzyme relative to the amount of drug is extremely small. So the enzyme is in the order of micrograms of material versus the drugs, which are usually in milligrams. So 1,000-fold differences.
This has been used in a number of biologics already. Some better known biologics, Herceptin and Rituxan, have used this. How has this altered the delivery of these drugs?
It's been amazing, quite frankly, and amazing for patients, for the healthcare system, as well as for our pharma partners. So if you think about it, Herceptin was typically given IV in a 30 to 90-minute injection. Rituxan can be given anywhere from 1.5 to 4 hours of an injection. But it's not just the injection itself. If you think about it, the patient has to go to an infusion center or a hospital to get that injection. They have to come in, they have to register, they see the healthcare professional, make sure all their blood work is fine, and then they get the infusion, then they're monitored afterwards, and then they go home. So even a 2-hour infusion can take a whole day of someone's time to go in, get the infusion, recover, and go home. So think about that. Now, the Herceptin that's available subcu is a 2 to 5 minute injection, and it can be given in the doctor's office. And at some point, we hope that many of these drugs will be self-administered or given by a nurse or a healthcare professional in the home. That's not the case yet, but that is the potential. Rituxan is now given in 5 to 7 minutes. So think about the time saving, the impact on quality of life of the patient and the caregiver, very significant. 2 recent examples, if I can just add on, that we recently had 2 drugs approved in the subcutaneous form. Darzalex Faspro was approved by Janssen for multiple myeloma. It's a 15 ml injection given in 3 to 5 minutes. Previously, patients had their initial dose in a 7-hour infusion, and their maintenance dose is 3 to 4 hours. So think about that, 7 hours versus 3 to 5 minutes. And the other drug that was just approved in the last couple of months is Roche's Phesgo, which is a combination of Herceptin and Perjeta for patients with breast cancer, also 15 mLs, given in 5 to 8 minutes versus the 2 drugs given separately over as long as 2.5 hours. So think about that impact.
Is there a cost or reimbursement consequence of being able to move delivery from an infusion center to a doctor's office or a home setting?
Absolutely. And many of our partners have done studies to measure time and motion and cost differences in the hospital setting versus in the doctor's office. So the benefits, are not only to the patient from a quality of life perspective, but there are many studies that our partners have published showing the impact on overall healthcare costs. So think about the physician time, the nurse's time, the pharmacist's time in terms of mixing things, the infusion share time, and there are, in many countries, limited infusion shares for IV infusions. If you could take patients and have them get their drug in a doctor's office and free up infusion shares for other therapies that don't have such an alternative, it's a real benefit to the healthcare system. So there's definitely reduced time, reduced costs, reduced materials for the health system in general.
We're in the midst of a pandemic. How has this affected the case for Enhanze and the discussions you've had with potential partners?
It's actually elevated it, and so it's a great question. We've always talked about the benefits of sub-Q to both the patients, the physicians, the hospital system, and for the pharma company. Now, even more so, patients don't want to go into hospitals or infusion chairs if they can avoid it. And unfortunately, what we're hearing is that many patients are not taking their drugs. They're not getting their oncologic treatment and their other treatments because they're afraid to go in, which would be really a shame. If they now have an alternative, it's so much easier for them to continue on with their treatments. So absolutely, this pandemic that we're in really highlights the benefits of sub-Q even more.
Is there any kind of strategy around using Enhanze for biosimilars?
In the early days, our early partners looked at the sub-Q formulation development as a life cycle play, and therefore it was a new formulation that had the potential to get new IP, intellectual property, and therefore extend the exclusivity of the product. We do see the opportunity that co-formulated products with the enhanced technology could generate new intellectual property and potentially extend the exclusivity and delay the opportunities for biosimilars. So, but more and more our partners are actually recognizing that they should be developing a sub-Q formulation as the first presentation. It shouldn't be that you develop an IV and then have to switch to a sub-Q. If sub-Q can be better for patients, better for the health system, and differentiate you and your product within the competitive landscape, it would behoove everyone to develop that subcutaneous formulation as the first presentation. And we're seeing our partners start to move in that direction.
Well, what does the Enhanze pipeline look like today?
Well, it's very exciting and it's growing. With our current 9 partners, we expect to have over 17 programs in various stages of development and commercialization by the end of this year. So that's a significant growth for us. That pipeline will generate over $1 billion in revenue by 2027. And we're excited about the continued potential that this can bring to patients across many therapeutic areas. And we think there's much more room for an opportunity for growth with new partners and new targets that could be developed in the sub-Q formulations.
Halozyme late last year underwent a big shift in its business following the failure of an experimental therapy for pancreatic cancer. It cut 55% of its staff and ended its cancer program. What's the strategy for the company going forward?
Well, first of all, let me say that we were all extremely disappointed at the failure of the PEG-PH20 pancreatic cancer program. It was a real disappointment for everyone at Halozyme, but mostly for the patients that we hoped would have benefited from this. That said, we had a strategy to pivot quickly, regardless of what the outcome of the clinical trials were. And our strategy going forward is really to focus on Enhanze and its growth potential over the coming years. We have our own IP until 2027. And so there's lots of opportunity for new Enhanze deals and new partnerships, and that's our primary focus. Separate from that, we are always looking to expand our portfolio with new platforms that can complement this technology, and we'll be continuing to look at those opportunities. But our singular focus right now is continuing to grow Enhanze.
I think of partnering in this industry as being built around kind of co-development strategies. I take the nature of the partnering agreements you have are somewhat different. How involved are you with your partners as they develop a drug using this?
We are very intimately involved with our partners, and I would say, even though it's not strictly a co-development, that our partners are in charge of the development, we bring a lot of scientific advice, know-how about sub-Q injections, know-how about our technology, of course, and our experience in having done this many, many times before with other partners. So we work very closely, especially in the early stages until we get into our first in human trials. There's a lot of collaboration and working together in that partnership. We continue that collaboration throughout the drug development process and into the regulatory filings. So we are very much involved and very closely involved with our partners, and that's important to us.
As you've been through this experience a number of times, what have you learned about what makes for a good partnership?
That's always a great question. I think of partnerships like a marriage, and maybe that sounds trite, but it really is. When we think about partnerships, there are three elements that we focus on: the strategic aspect, the operational aspect, and then the relationship aspect. The strategic is one about making sure that we are each meeting our respective goals for having entered into the partnership. And if you look across the industry, partnering is a very common activity that many companies engaged in. But if you ask, and I know there have been many surveys done, have the partnerships achieved the strategic objectives and all the intent of what was originally expected? Unfortunately, most companies would say no, it hasn't met that expectation. I would say for Halozyme, that's a really big focus. And for our 9 partners, we do health checks. We do we meet as teams to understand how we're working together. We want to make sure we're meeting the strategic objectives as well as the operational and relationship. On the operational side, it's making sure that we understand what's expected of us, what's expected of the partner. We have timelines to meet, and we want to make sure that we meet those commitments. And on the relationship side, it's all about the people. A partnership is really ultimately all about the people, the trust, the collaboration, the interaction and the transparency between the two organizations. If we are open, we share information, we're transparent about the good topics and sometimes the challenging issues we might face, we can solve them together. But if we're not having that relationship at that level, then it can lead to problems. So I'm happy to say with our partners, we do ask how we're doing. We do health check surveys, and we are really pleased that all of our partners feel very positively about the relationship with Halozyme.
You are in charge of global partnering for the company. How has the change in the company's strategy affected your role?
From the perspective of alliance management, it has not changed it because I was leading the alliance management group. Previously, the alliance management group is the direct day-to-day contact with our partners. What I did do is take on additional responsibility to also lead business development. So my job has grown in responsibility, but the focus has always been for me on Enhanze, and it continues to be on Enhanze.
Renee Tannenbaum, Vice President of Global Partnering for Halozyme. Renee, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.